Hello, and welcome. Thank you. It's good to see all of our corporate social responsibility students in one place. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Dr. Lindsay Godwin in the Stiller School of Business, and we have Pat over here. Pat, you want to wave at everybody? You, that's you. And William Hansey over here. So I think that most of you know us, but so our three sections combined, that all of you are taking corporate social responsibility. And we are thrilled to have our colleague and friend Martin Wolf with us again here from 7th Generation, who's going to be talking to you about the work that they do at 7th Generation. We'll have time for question and answers. But most importantly, I think, as you guys know, your final project in our corporate social responsibility class is going to be a real life project for 7th Generation. So Martin is going to set you up with that challenge. I said I should have brought the Mission Impossible music so we could have played it for you guys. And we'll be talking more details about the final in class, but Martin's going to set the stage for that final for you. And so just to start us off, I wanted to share with you a little bit about who Martin is, other than being an amazing person that we've gotten to know over the last several years of working with him through this course at Champlain. I found this on one of the blogs on 7th Generation, Martin. So I love this intro that they described you. So I'm going to quote it from the blog. So I didn't write this. This is from the 7th Generation from their site. Saying that, maybe you know, I don't know if you know. Oh, so maybe this is like a surprise for Martin. So surprise. In Arabic culture, they speak of a powerful magical being who lives inside bottles. Rub the bottle and the genie appears to grant any wish. It sounds far-fetched, but it's not. At 7th Generation, they say we have a very real genie who lives inside every bottle we make and makes the magic pour out. We call him Science Man, aka Martin Wolf. Martin is officially the Director of Product Sustainability and Authenticity, but we always think of him as the heart and soul of everything we do, because over the past 2 decades, he's made sure our stuff is safe for the planet and other living things. So that's what they say about you on the site. That's pretty exciting, Martin. So, and officially, Martin's bio, he is responsible for assuring the sustainable design of products at 7th Generation. As many of you know, we've talked about it in class, as a manufacturer and distributor of ecological, household, and personal care products. He brings more than 40 years of experience in industrial and environmental chemistry to his work, starting with environmental fate and metabolism studies for agricultural chemicals, followed by studies of the occurrence of hazardous chemicals in the environment, conducting life cycle studies for industrial processes, and designing more sustainable household cleaning products. During his tenure at 7th Generation, Mr. Wolf has developed frameworks for environmental product design, helped educate his coworkers, customers, and consumers about the environmental impacts of consumer products and the industries that produce them. He has successfully lobbied for passage of phosphate bans in a number of states and brought change to the cleaning products industry through more sustainable product designs. In addition to his work at 7th Gen, he served as chair of the Strategic Advisory Committee, the vice chair of the Sustainable Committee, and as vice chair for the Asthma Task Force and the American Cleaning Institute. He's done lots of cool things. And so, without further ado, I will turn it over to Martin with just one slight reminder. We'll remind you at the end as well that if to sign in when you leave on the way out, there's a sign-in table for all of our different sections right outside there. So if you didn't get a chance to sign in on the way in, you can sign in on the way out. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Martin. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you. So I've never been equated to a genie before. I hope I can live up to the billing. If any of you have a bottle of 7th Generation product with you, if you would try rubbing it and see if I appear. What I hope to do today is discuss with you what 7th Generation thinks of when it says we're doing something in a sustainable way. And I like an interactive presentation rather than just standing here and speaking. So in the course of the presentation, I'm going to stop and ask questions of you, especially those of you in the back who thought you would be difficult to see or speak with. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainable, actually, products first. I've changed my presentation without changing the outline slide. And taking the principles of sustainability, discuss how we design our products, but then ask you the question and try to answer it, can you really make a sustainable product if you don't have a sustainable company? And then talk about the economy in which our company exists and ask the question, can we really be a sustainable company if we're not in a sustainable economy? And then when I'm finished with that, as was announced, I'll talk to you about a challenge that we'd like to present to you, and then open the floor up for any questions you might have. So, without further ado, unless there's a question, I'll start with a question for you. And you don't have to answer this now, but I will expect an answer from you toward the end of the presentation. So, there are two questions, the first of which is, how much food do you eat every day? Not in calories, but in pounds. So think about the size of, an 8-ounce steak or a 12-ounce package of frozen vegetables. In the course of a day, how many of those would you eat? And not worrying about how much water you drink, just what you eat. Okay, so think about that for a while. And the second question I'm going to ask you is, how much air do you breathe in a day? Same thing, pounds, not any other unit, or kilograms, but a unit of mass. Okay, those are my questions, initial questions for you. There are more as we go through the presentation. Have those set? Okay, moving on. What is sustainability? So you've been taking courses in sustainable business and business ethics. Can anyone give me a definition of sustainability? Come on. In the back, in the maroon sweater. Yeah, what's sustainability? When you think of sustainability, what do you think of?
I think of preserve it and coming up with things that make it easier to not use as much, I guess.
Okay, so using less. Yes, sir.
I think it is the practice of using current resources without putting in danger the future generation.
Okay, so using resources today without endangering future generations. Any others? Okay, so be forewarned. I may not wait for you to raise your hand. I might pick on you. But a wonderful definition of sustainability that was developed by the Brundtland Commission, which is the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development, is that sustainability is meeting today's needs without diminishing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. It's a wonderfully elegant definition because it doesn't say anything about what those needs are. It just says that we should be able to meet our needs today without diminishing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. That's a very powerful statement and a very simple statement. So, another question. Can anyone identify that object? Yes, sir. Oh, wait. I was going to say you've already answered one question. Anyone else? Satellite. Okay, it's a satellite, but with the International Space Station, exactly. And what's unique about the International Space Station, it is the only other object in our solar system that has human life on it, which is pretty amazing. Okay, does anyone know what that object is? I see you nodding. Do you want to? Nope. Take a guess.
Hubble Space Telescope?
Nope. I'll give you a hint. It's attached to the International Space Station at this point. Okay, and a couple of months ago, it was in the headlines because it actually failed to get into orbit to rendezvous with the International Space Station. Okay, it's the Dragon resupply ship launched by SpaceX. And every few months, they have to send a resupply ship to the space station. Can anyone say why? Yeah, because the people on the space station are using up supplies and they have no way of replenishing them from within the space station. So the space station is not sustainable and it needs to be resupplied from time to time. So, another question. Can anyone identify this object? Okay, the planet Earth, which Buckminster Fuller, I don't know if any of you know the architect Buckminster Fuller, he designed the geodesic dome. He called this Spaceship Earth when he saw this picture, which I think is a wonderful description of it. But when is the next supply ship coming to Spaceship Earth? Yeah, probably never. So given that, it means that we need to sustain ourselves with the resources that are on the Earth today. So is there a model for doing this? Is there a way we can meet today's needs with the resources that are on the Earth and make sure that those same resources are available for future generations? So I'm going to get very personal now and ask you another question. This one you do not have to answer out loud. Well, not that one. We've already decided it can be, should be, and needs to be. The question I want to ask you is, how old are you? It's a pretty simple and straightforward question. Okay, now you're going to have to speak up. What's something you're made of? What's an element or substance in your body? Water is a great example. Anyone want to guess? Carbon's another great example. Okay, so how old are those elements? How old is the water in your body? How old is the carbon in your body? Right, it's about the same age as the planet Earth, maybe a little bit older, depending on where it was formed. So the age of your body in its current incarnation may be 20 some odd years, but the age of the materials you're made from is billions of years. So if you felt tired this morning when you got out of bed, there was a reason for that. And if anyone says you're as old as dirt, you say exactly. Okay? So, but think about that. 100 years ago, that water that's in you now might have been in an ocean, might have been in Lake Champlain. 1,000 years ago, someplace else. 1,000,000 years ago, still some other place. 100 million years ago, might have been in a dinosaur. So get in touch with that inner Tyrannosaurus Rex. You can do anything. The point is that nature uses these elements over and over again to make sure that life that existed 100 years ago or 1,000,000 years ago or 100 million years ago could be sustained and can sustain us today. So there are carbon cycles, there are water cycles, there are phosphorus cycles, there are nitrogen cycles. All of these cycles ensure that the current generation can have its needs met, but future generations can have their needs met. And we have to think in terms of reusing these same materials on this finite planet in the same way over and over again. Okay, I hope you don't feel too old now. I'm sure you'll acclimate to the thought. Okay, so with this in mind, how do we make sustainable products? And before launching into that, any questions? Comments? Concerns? All right, onward we go. So we already talked about the fact that Earth is finite, has finite number of materials, and there is no resupply ship coming in the near future, at least not that we know of. So to be sustainable, we need to make products that use the resources of the Earth and then make them available over again. So one way we can do that is to, and I'm going to grab the microphone here, or maybe I can just use a pointer. Let's see if this works. Oops. Getting ahead of myself. Okay, no pointer. So one way we can do this is make a lot of noise with the microphone. We can take energy and materials from the Earth, process them in factories, and produce products and wastes, which we then send back to our factories. So one example of how we do that is taking petroleum from the earth. Okay, there it is. Is taking petroleum from the earth and then making it into plastic, but then recycling that plastic over and over and over again. So seventh generation does that by taking already used plastic and converting it to our bottles. Most of our bottles are about 100% post-consumer recycled carbon. And you might notice there's one that has an 80/100, and that's because the recycled plastic sometimes is not as pliable as virgin plastic. And what happens with our very large laundry bottles is you develop what are called environmental stress cracks. Leads to leaking of the product, and consumers really don't like that, especially when it's happening on the back seat of their car. So we use about 20% virgin plastic in our largest bottles to make it stronger. So another way we can do that, and I'll just stand here and talk, is to take energy and materials from the earth, send them to our factories to produce products and wastes, and then return it to the earth and let earth recycle the materials for us. And we do that by taking things like plant oils, converting them to useful ingredients like the surfactants or cleaning agents in our products, which go down the drain and can biodegrade and become plant oils over again. So we tie into Earth's carbon cycle to do that. And we measure this in two ways. The RCI stands for the Renewable Carbon Index, and that's a theoretical calculation of the amount of carbon that came from plants over the total amount of carbon in the product. So we want that to be 100%, and we get into the high 90s most of the time. There's also a measurement that can be made with what should I call it, laboratory equipment, liquid scintillation counters that look for radioactive carbon, carbon-14. Turns out there's a lot of carbon-14 in the atmosphere, so when you look at the carbon in a plant, you have a certain level of radioactivity. But if you look at carbon that's been trapped in the ground for millions of years, all that radioactivity is dissipated, and so petroleum has no radioactive carbon in it. And by looking at that ratio of radioactive carbon to non-radioactive carbon, or C14 to C12, you can determine what % of your material is plant-based. And the USDA certifies products using this technique, and as you can see, their measurements are actually quite close to our calculated values, as they should be. And any variation is either due to their measurement or to the fact that our suppliers don't always give us 100% pure product. Okay, any questions about how we reuse materials? In that case, it's not enough to just reuse those materials. We have other things to think about besides the availability of those materials for future generations. When we design a product, we also have to think about the health of the people using those products, the health of our factory workers, but also the cost and performance of that product in the marketplace. Most products have what they call a premium brand that's usually very expensive, and a value brand that's less expensive but doesn't work as well. You've got a Cadillac and you've got a Chevy Spectrum, a Mercedes, and I hate even to say Volkswagen now, but I can't think of another analogy. You have Tide versus Arm & Hammer. So always a premium, high value product and a lower cost, lower performing product. And consumers expect products in a particular category to lie in that spectrum of cost and efficacy. We have to be on that same spectrum. If we charge a lot for a product that doesn't perform well, even if we've done wonderful things for the environment, people won't buy our products. So we have to live in that same spectrum that other companies do. But where many other companies believe that if they meet regulatory requirements, they've met the requirements for human health and safety, we think that we, as a responsible company, have to go further. So, question for you. How much carcinogen should be allowed in a consumer product, whether personal care or home care? Give me a number between 0 and 100%. Okay, in the white sweater, how much carcinogen would you like in your product? You'd allow as much as 30% of a carcinogen in your product? Okay, carcinogen is something that causes cancer. I apologize.
I would say under 5%.
Okay. Most people actually say they want 0%. So how many here would like 0% carcinogens in your product? So how much do you think the law allows to be in a product? I'm sorry? I wouldn't say lots, but they leave it up to companies to decide. And as long as a company thinks there's not enough to cause 1 in 100,000 cancers in the population, the product is safe. 1 in 100,000. So we have 300 million people in the United States. That's about 3,000 cancers a year. That's okay. Okay, thank you. But that's what the law allows. We don't think there should be any carcinogens or other chronic toxicants in the product either. Great. So we have what we call our standards for ingredients and for our products. So there are two ways a product can hurt you. One is what we call acute toxicity. And that is the ability to cause you immediate harm. It gets on your skin, it causes a burn. You swallow it, you get really sick or die. So we design all our products by mixing the ingredients in such a way that when you test the product, it's not acutely toxic. You can drink it and you might get sick, but you won't, most likely won't die. You can get it on your skin and it is most likely not going to cause irritation, etc. But then we have concerns about what we call chronic toxicants. These are things that don't hurt you immediately, but hurt you over time. And a good example of this is cigarette smoking. One cigarette is not going to kill you, but if you smoke continuously over a long period of time, it will make you sick and ultimately can kill you. So substances that have this property of chronic toxicity are carcinogens, neurotoxins, reproductive toxicants, which will harm growing children or fetal, developing children, not yet born, whatever word we want to use. And we will make sure that any substance that is on a list of known carcinogens, neurotoxins, or is similar to those substances will not be used in our products. And we also try to avoid what are called sensitizers. These are things that will cause you to have an allergic reaction if you're exposed to them over and over again. Okay? There are some sensitizers that people really like to be exposed to, believe it or not. And those tend to be fragrances from plants. Now, many of you may know that if you touch poison ivy, you're likely to get a rash from it. What most people don't know is that there are many other plant oils that will also cause irritation. So even though we only use pure plant oils in our products, it's possible that some of those plant oils are sensitizers. So limonene, which occurs in orange oil, linalool, which occurs in lavender, are both sensitizers. We will list those on our products, so if people know they have a sensitivity to those materials, they're warned not to use our products, or at least our fragrance products. We also make products that are free of any fragrances whatsoever. So the issue is that many companies, first of all, use synthetic fragrances, They don't tell you what are in those fragrances. Many of the ingredients can be sensitizers. They could also be chronic toxicants like endocrine disruptors or carcinogens. And finally, we try to protect the health of the planet by using no volatile organic compounds. These are things that evaporate into the air and can be converted to other harmful chemicals like they contribute to smog, ozone layer depletion. They can react with sunlight and ozone to become formaldehyde, etc. All right, so that's how we try to protect people and the planet, but how do the products perform? To go back to the 4 circles. Well, first, if we look at the amount of bio-based content in our products, you can see that we, relative to other green brands and relative to Tide, have very high levels of bio-based content. So our products are part of that carbon cycle of renewability. And if you look at how our products perform, a Consumer Reports survey had us performing very close to Tide. Not quite as good, but they are tough to beat. And we're priced competitively with a premium product like Tide. So we're trying to meet that consumer expectation of a premium product. Okay, I'll stop there and ask if there are any other questions. Okay, I'll move on and ask the question once again. Even if we're making sustainable products, if we're not a sustainable business, does it really matter? So some of the things we do is work toward our mission, which is to inspire a consumer revolution that nurtures the health of the next 7 generations, i.e., we want to educate consumers and inspire them to buy products that are better for their health, and we want to innovate to make those better products. So we have what we call 4 aspirations. They are to nurture nature, that is, to do things that will not harm the environment. They are to enhance health, which means we want, as I said, to educate consumers to do things that are better for their health and to make products available that are better for their health. And we want to champion honesty and transparency in commerce. We want companies to be clear about what they're putting in their products so you as a consumer can make an educated choice. And finally, we want to build communities. Part, as I said, of being sustainable is making sure that the economic system you're in is sustainable, but you also need sustainable social systems. You can't have large gaps in income because they lead to social instability. You can't have large gaps in social power because that leads to instability. You can't have classes of people that are mistreated because that leads to social instability. And if you have that instability, you don't have sustainability. So as a company, we engage with a lot of nonprofits, NGOs, support their functions. And we are what's called a B corporation or a benefit corporation. So how many of you have heard of C corporations or B corporations? Okay, good. Most hands went up, so it's being covered in your class, I assume. Okay, I'm getting a sort of look, so what I'll say is, as you know, most companies have to be incorporated in a particular state. Many companies choose Delaware incorporation because the laws are fairly relaxed. But in those articles of incorporation are the responsibilities of the board of directors of the company. And in almost every state, the articles of incorporation say that the board has a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders of the company. And that is their sole responsibility. This comes out of the 1930s when a lot of investors were ripped off by companies that ultimately went bankrupt. And there was a need to protect, especially public investors. However, what does that require of a board in terms of employees, or in terms of the community where the company is located, or in terms of the environment? And the answer is, it doesn't require anything of the board. And in fact, if a board tries to do something for employees or the environment or communities that may be viewed as hurting shareholders, then they're in violation of their legal responsibility. So several states have started what are called B corporations or benefit corporations. Actually, states didn't start it. There's a nonprofit called B Labs that started it, and they've gotten something in the order of 20 states to now offer B Corp incorporation. And in a B corporation, the articles of incorporation say that the board has a responsibility to the shareholders, to the communities where the business exists, to the employees, and to the environment. So now the board has to balance its decisions in all those arenas. And I think that's a much more balanced approach to doing business. And Seventh Generation is proud to have been, or proud to be, a charter member of the B Corp family. There are about 3,000 B Corps worldwide now. So it's a growing movement. And it really gives me hope that we can get a system of commerce that really is equitable and really has a much broader range of considerations, so we don't get the adverse impacts we get today, or the contention between management and employees, or between companies and the environment. Okay, this is the last section before I go into question and answer mode, and it is to answer the question, even if you're a sustainable company, if the economy you're in is not sustainable, can your company be truly sustainable? And I again want to begin by asking you a question. Are you ready? It's more than question number 3, but I changed the order of the slides. When did the first settlers come to New England? Okay, around 1630 is a good guess, but wrong.
Wouldn't it just be like the Native Americans that were there like long before everybody?
Exactly. So Native Americans came here about 8,000 years ago. It was a trick question, obviously. They came here about 8,000 years ago, about 7,500 years before the European settlers. I was going to give you a hint, but you didn't need it. But what did those Indians do? Well, first of all, they had different tribes that traded with each other. They were engaged in commerce. And they hunted, they trapped, they fished, and they traded those things with each other, as well as minerals for beads, and pottery and clay, etc. So the first European settlers came in roughly 1600. The earliest settlement I know of is near Castine, Maine, from 1594. And what did they do when they got here? They hunted, they trapped, they fished, and they did 2 other things that the Native Americans did not do. They cut down trees, they logged, and they brought a system of agriculture that involved clearing large areas of land. And New England became very well known for the quality of its timber. It was exported to other colonies, it was brought back to Europe. And, something very important happened around 1634, since you mentioned that date. Does anyone know what happened in 1634? And that picture is a hint. Any guesses? Okay. Not a logging community, but notice the water? Okay, the first water-powered sawmill was built in New England in 1634. And about 100 years later, they had cut down every commercially viable pine tree in New England. And then they started cutting spruce trees because they didn't have any pine left. Whoops. And I got ahead of myself again. How did that happen? Okay. So by 1850, they had cleared most of the viable softwoods in the area, and frankly, they were running out of things to cut. Around 1900, 1910, the logging industry in New England collapsed. it had literally cut itself out of business in about 250, 300 years. Think about that. How fast are we drilling for oil, and how much oil do we have left? The estimates vary, but it's in the order of a few hundred years. Think of how fast we are fracking for natural gas. We seem to do things in a way that is a race to the finish, rather than thinking about how to do it in a more sustainable way. Now, with logging, around 1900, Theodore Roosevelt and the first Secretary of Forest and Parks, Gifford Pinchot, developed a system of sustainable logging, and it was actually tested here in Vermont in the first instance. So if you had been to New England around 1900, you would not have seen very many intact forests. The land had virtually been all cleared. Most of the trees in New England now are less than 100 years old. But because of the conservation efforts of Roosevelt and Pinchot, the forests have been largely restored, and they're now logged in a much more sustainable way. So we have a lot of thanks to give to them. But the point is, without that effort, our land would be devoid of trees. And around the world today, there are still races to cut down trees as fast as we can. We see the disappearance of rainforest in the Amazon, in Malaysia, and Indonesia. That is both removing animal habitat as well as reducing the beneficial effects of forests, like sequestering carbon dioxide. Okay. What we do as a company is advocate for change on a grand scale. We want to see the way we do commerce change. So we advocate for safer ingredients, reform of what's called the Toxic Substances Control Act. Last year, we campaigned here in Vermont to get a Safer Products Act that would have gotten carcinogens out of consumer products in Vermont. It got scaled back to removing carcinogens from children's products, but it was still a step forward. And we're doing that work now in New York, and we're working with California on disclosure of ingredients. So with that said, I want to get back to the questions I asked you at the beginning of this talk. But before I give you that answer, let me ask you if you have any questions. Okay, so the moment of truth is here. How much food do you eat in a day, in pounds or kilograms? It varies, but there's a range. Any guesses?
3 or 4 pounds?
3 or 4 pounds is actually a very good guess. Does anyone want to refine that guess, or you're willing to let that stand? Okay. The answer is 2 to 3 pounds. And again, it varies with individuals. All right. How much air do you breathe in a day? It's much lighter, much less dense, I should say, than the food you eat. 5? Do I hear 10? Okay. We heard 20 pounds, we heard 60 pounds, and studies say you breathe about 30 or 40 pounds a day. So good range. But the point is, you're breathing 10 times, and by the way, that's for a sedentary person. If you're athletic and moving around a lot, you breathe more air. Sports, right, they may be up to 60 pounds or higher. Okay. The point is, you breathe a lot more air than you eat food. So how many of you worry about contaminants in your food? Okay, how many of you worry about contaminants in your air? Okay, that's a really good showing, because there's some people that spray almost anything in their air of their homes. They have these plug-in vaporized fragrance sources that are putting who knows what in the air. They certainly don't know, because the manufacturer doesn't have to disclose the ingredients. So here you are worrying often about parts per million or parts per billion of contaminants in something that you eat 3 pounds of and not even thinking about what's in the medium that you eat or breathe 40 pounds of every day. So with that, I'm going to get into what you need to know. Your mission difficult, if not impossible. Okay? Cue the music. So seventh generation is a consumer products company. We sell products, and we need to reach out to our consumers about those products in a way that conveys who we are as a company. And when you market with the mission in mind, frequently with partnership of nonprofits or NGOs, you have what's called cause marketing. So what we would like you to do is help us by giving us ideas on cause-related marketing we could develop around any of our products. And I just realized I don't have the slides here that talk about the products we make, which is a really serious oversight, and I apologize for that. So we'll discuss that in a moment.
You can send it to us and we can show them how fast it's.
Okay, great. But we typically make household cleaning products, baby diapers, water bottles. We make a French press coffee maker called the Press. That's made of double wall stainless steel, not tubing, made out of double walled stainless steel. I'll leave it at that. So you can brew a cup of coffee in it, and then it becomes your to-go cup. So you don't have to clean out your French press. In any event, moving on. Another thing is to help us with a campaign that's going to start in 2016, which we're calling the Come Clean campaign. And it's a campaign to get consumers to demand that household cleaning products disclose the ingredients that are in their products. And I don't know why the computer just turned off, but such is life.
Why is it just cleaning products? I mean, I get the cleaning product company, but like, shouldn't it be required than that?
Well, we think it should be also, but because that's the space we're in, it's one we can talk to. Also, personal care products currently are covered by the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that does require disclosure of ingredients with the exception of fragrances. So personal care products are at least partially covered now. And we'd like to see those same rules applied to cleaning products. The cleaning product companies say it's too expensive, we can't do it. We change our labels and ingredients all the time. That would be a major burden. But the point is there's an even bigger industry already doing it. So it can be done. And we'd like to see lawmakers get behind proposals to do it. So the third option, and we'll see where Windows ends up with this. The third option is actually built around this stainless steel French press that we call Press. And the idea is to help us build a campaign to talk about the benefits to the consumer and the environment of using this product. And the biggest improvement we see is that for people that want to brew one cup of coffee at a time, who might be considering a Keurig type machine where you have a capsule made of non-recyclable plastic. It's a multi-laminate plastic and an aluminum or polymer top. You can take that, and unfortunately you have to throw it away. You can't recycle it. And instead, with the Press, we will have a biodegradable, almost tea bag-like source of coffee that you can carry with you and throw in your press whenever you want and brew a cup of coffee. Or you don't even need our coffee bag. You could just take coffee, grind it, and throw it into your press, and the press automatically gets rid of the grounds or pushes them to the bottom so you can then dispose of them in any composting. So that's number 3. Help us design a campaign that talks about the waste avoided by using the press. And then the fourth and last opportunity, for want of a better word, is to help us look at what is called the life cycle impacts of one of our products and develop messaging to consumers around those life cycles. So how many of you have heard of life cycle analysis?
You all raise your hand.
Okay, some of them went up. Everyone else is asleep. Sorry, guess I'm not that entertaining. Genie that I am, I can't keep people awake. We have some software that does life cycle analyses on materials. We can take one of our products and look at the life cycle impact of the product and then talk about how to message the advantages of doing things the seventh generation way versus a conventional way. Okay? So those are the 4 options, and obviously your professors will talk to you in greater detail about their expectations of how you will approach this and what your deliverables are. So with that said, for anyone who's still awake, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Questions for Martin? But yeah, so of those 4 choices, again, we'll be talking in more detail in class and sharing the deliverables with you guys on our campus. Rebooted. We'll be doing one of those options. So sort of a choose your own adventure that you saw on the slide. So you have 4 different options for your final project. You can work on the teams. Again, I know we have different teams set up in the different classes. And so we will talk more about that. So 4 different things. And these again are real life projects, but then we will, if we can, Martin will come to the final presentation. Martin might not be able to come and be at everybody's final presentation, so we will be recording them and sharing them back to seventh generation along with the presentation deliverables that you'll be doing. So all this will be going back to seventh generation as part of their campaigns that they're working on. So we've had great ideas that have come up in the past from students. We know you guys will come up with fantastic ideas as well, because we have some new projects. Some of these projects are new that are brand new this year. So with that, I know we can talk more specifically about questions you probably have about the final, but I know that's the one big thing is you'll pick one of those 4 options. But questions for Martin about seventh generation, about their products, about the work around educating consumers. What questions do you guys have for him while we have him here and the benefit of his wisdom? Yes.
Do you have anything online yet about the Come Clean campaign, or is that still sort of underground?
So it's going to be a 2016 campaign, so we're developing collaterals now. So you won't find anything yet.
Okay.
So this is to encourage consumers to band together, to raise their voices in campaign.
Well, it will be directed to consumers, to write to companies to come clean about what's in their products. Exactly.
Okay. Like a grassroots kind of thing.
Yes, that's typically how we work. Actually, I should say that we work at multiple levels. So, as you heard in the introduction, I work on industry associations, on their sustainability committees, and on their strategic planning committees to help them guide the rest of the industry to more sustainable ways of doing things. And it's a very slow, torturous process, but you can actually make change at the industry level, the association level. But we also work at the consumer level because our success as a company depends on how well we communicate with our consumers. And if we can sell our products, we should also be able to sell an understanding as to why those products are to be preferred over other products. Why we do things the way we do. So we see the grassroots approach as being more powerful, and we've also seen change from those efforts. It's been very gratifying.
So some of our students, Martin, have sort of a very surface level understanding of seventh generation and the kind of products that the company makes. Can you just sort of elucidate to them just the broad categories of products? So one is cleaning products, you know that. And that includes dishwashing liquids, it includes laundry detergents, right?
Yeah.
Laundry products category?
Exactly.
This is what, 4 different categories of products?
So we have actually 3 business units for our products. We make cleaning products, and that includes laundry liquid, dish liquid, automatic dishwasher detergent, spray cleaners, and such. That's called home care. We also have what's called, we also make paper products. That's in that unit. So these will be paper towels, paper napkins, bath tissue, facial tissue, mostly from 100% recycled paper. There are a couple of lines that have some virgin paper in them that I'm trying to get rid of, but that's another story. We have a baby care division that's mostly baby diapers and baby wipes, and the way we make diapers differently is inside of every diaper, the bulk of the weight is actually wood pulp that helps absorb the liquid and distribute it so the baby doesn't get wet after wetting themselves. The conventional approach is to bleach that pulp that's inside the diaper, and there's a host of environmental issues with bleaching. We don't bleach that pulp at all. It's brown, which shouldn't matter that much because you can't see it. It's inside the diaper. So that saves the chemicals for bleaching and the byproducts of the bleaching process. It actually saves wood because bleaching destroys some of the cellulose, and so not bleaching saves that cellulose, and it avoids the use of a lot of energy and water. So that's the advantage of our diapers over conventional diapers.
That's the second business unit?
Yep, and then the third business unit is the bobble, water bottle, press, and we now have a stainless steel bottle called Insulate that will be introduced this month. So those are our 3 product lines, but 4 classes of products, you're right, when you consider the paper.
Can you inform the students about where most of these products are made? Because I know we had that conversation about moving a lot of the products from China to the US.
Right, so most of our products are made in North America, typically US and Canada. Cleaning products exclusively, and baby diapers are made exclusively in North America. Feminine hygiene products, which are part of our paper division actually, are made either in North America or Germany. We have a manufacturer in Germany. The one product that was being made in China is our plastic water bottle called Bobble. And we went and did an audit of the factory, and let's just say we were not happy with what we saw. So we had 5 manufacturing facilities in China. We entered into what are called corrective action plans with 2 of them so that they would improve their performance. And then the work of all the other manufacturing plants we brought into the United States, to Ohio to be specific. So the Bobble plastic bottle is now made exclusively in the United States. The 2 plants we entered into corrective action plans with make our stainless steel press and our stainless steel it's called Insulate bottle. So those are still being made in China, and we do audits to make sure they're made in a socially responsible way.
Is there any talk about moving those to the US?
Not yet, because the companies were willing to enter into consent decrees, and we've heard from other companies that have worked with these 2 companies that they do try, that they want to improve the way they operate. So,
And Al Gore is a big investor.
right, so in 2014, we received a $30 million investment from a company called Generation Asset Management, which is partially managed and owned by Al Gore, who visited Burlington on October 6th. I don't know if any of you went to the lecture at UVM, and then after that lecture, he came to 7th Generation for a private meeting with us. But representatives of his company are at Seventh Generation for our quarterly board meetings. So that's always very, very exciting. And something you said sparked something else I wanted to talk about. So we discussed the products. The origin of our name. Does anyone know where the name Seventh Generation comes from?
I think I read it when you slide.
Oh,
It said that like, that was the 7 generations down the line, it'd still be like this, sort of deal.
exactly. I didn't know if that slide was in there. I know I didn't talk to it. But I mentioned the economic pressure that the Europeans brought to North America, and it actually created an economic issue for the Native American tribes, who therefore formed what was called a confederacy, the Iroquois Confederacy, where 6 tribes got together and they created a constitution called the Great Law. And one of the laws is, in our every deliberation, we will consider the impacts of our decisions on the next 7 generations, which is a very, very powerful statement. So, should be in our Constitution too, but such is life.
Other questions for Mark? Things about their products, things about their company,
Thank you.
internship opportunities?
All right, thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.